Welcome to EconTalk, part of the Library of Economics and Liberty. I'm your host, Russ Roberts of Stanford University's Hoover Institution. Our website is econtalk.org, where you can subscribe, comment on this podcast, and find links and other information related to today's conversation. You'll also find our archives where you can listen to every episode we've ever done going back to 2006. Our email address is mail@econtalk.org. We'd love to hear from you. Today is March 16th, 2017, and my guest is podcaster and writer Erica Sandberg. She writes often on issues of personal finance. And our topic for today is a little bit different. It's homelessness and some creative ways that people in the San Francisco area and surrounding areas are helping homeless people. Let's start, Erica. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background?
Hey, Russ. My background is in personal finance, consumer finance, actually, banking, credit issues, budgeting, and I do have a podcast. It's called Adventures with Money, and it's all about how you can enjoy life no matter what you own or owe. It really doesn't matter. And that's my focus. It really is about how people can use money in a way that makes them really happy, just truly fulfilled, and kind of taking it down to a very kind of basic level with that. And it's something that I love. It's something that I'm very passionate about.
So on the surface, that seems a long way from homelessness. And you live in the city of San Francisco. I spend my summers in the Palo Alto area, which is about 30, 45 minutes or so south of the city itself. But in the whole Bay Area, partly for a variety of reasons, partly the weather, partly the nature of the citizenry, there are a lot of people living on the streets in the San Francisco area. And as a citizen there, as a resident, you have encountered them just going about your life, right?
Absolutely. It's a small city. So when it comes to actual size, we don't have a lot of room for people to be dispersed when they are homeless. They're here. They're everywhere. And it's really alarming. I know that when people come to the city, they're so eager to enjoy it, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful cities in the United States, in my opinion. But then you see this situation that's overwhelming, and it really does shock people. And again, I think it is in part because there's not a lot of places for them to go. We've got about 6,500 people technically on the street, and they're concentrated in very particular areas. And you can't get away from it. It's going to be something that you see, feel, smell, touch. It's here.
So let's start a little bit with some philosophical issues. I think certainly in the 80s, when homelessness became a political issue and a social issue, a lot of people viewed it as a failure of government. They blamed Reagan budget cuts. They blamed it homelessness on housing policy. But since then, and we've done a variety of things as a policy space to try to help people who are homeless and deal with it. But since then, there's been some recognition that some of the people who are on the street, maybe a significant number, have emotional and mental issues. It's not merely a financial problem that they can't make ends meet and pay rent or own a house. And part of it is when we do have government programs to help folks who are out on the street, some of them, for a whole bunch of reasons, just don't want to be part of that. Are those issues that arise in San Francisco?
They are pervasive. And it's really interesting to me because I think many times we're asked to believe something that our eyes are telling us is completely different. We get a lot of news reports and homeless advocates who say, "Hey, these are women and children who are homeless," and I'm looking around thinking, "This is not what I'm seeing."
Yeah,
this is right. And I know that they do exist. I'm not saying they don't, but overwhelmingly, it is male. Yeah. People who are clearly on a substance, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is that they're on something, and or mentally ill. And that is what we're seeing. So is this a grapes of wrath type of migration of people desperately seeking work and, begging on the street saying, we'll do anything? It's just not what I'm seeing, and it's not what other people see. So
when you talk about women with children, I think some of them, I assume, are in homeless shelters. It's hard for us to, unless you're working with that community, I think it's probably hard to assess their how common that is. But and this, of course, not just a San Francisco problem. We have it here in Washington, D.C., where I live outside the summer. It's certainly the case in New York, which is not weather pleasant, but it's not uncommon, obviously, to see people on the street. We're talking about people who are, literally living on the street, sleeping, collecting stuff, often pushing shopping carts with their belongings, or have created little shelters out of cardboard. I mean, it's a very tragic situation, and they are predominantly male. And of course, the substance abuse or use issue is hard to disentangle, because some people are probably on alcohol and drugs because they're miserable, and some are alcohol and drug users who became homeless as a result, right? So this causation is running in both directions.
Absolutely. And it really is, to use an old cliche, it's a chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
What came first here? And in a way, it kind of doesn't matter, because if you want to try and disentangle all of it, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, it's not so relevant if you're trying to help. Although it
exactly.
is in a big picture, it's relevant. I think, but I want to get back to your personal story, because you wrote a really interesting column for the San Francisco Chronicle about what you called 6 tragedies. So talk about that experience, what you wrote about in that article, and what kind of reaction you got.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like a lot of people, I was just really fed up. You're kind of walking around thinking, what is being done? We're walking by these people who are either dead, dying, in some way, shape, or form, suffering, and we get so anesthetized to it. We walk by, we're not seeing it any longer. Right, we do. We shuttle away. We're just going to turn our heads and going, oh, that's really horrible, and we'll just keep walking. And it really hit me over a long period of time how that is part of the problem. That absolutely is. We're not, and this is, I think, very key, and this is why I wrote the piece, is we don't have the answers. As a person, I'm a consumer finance person. I don't have the answer to this, but I do know that a lot of money is being generated that goes towards these issues, and we're not seeing any results. We're seeing these terrible things happen, and who's doing anything about it? And it drove me nuts. It absolutely did. So I just decided to kind of take it on and say, these are people who need assistance. Now let's get the people who are supposed to be doing something to do something. And this is why I will never go into politics, because the people like me I want to needle them and say, hey, we're on you. We're watching. This is what we're seeing, and we really want some action. And it's up to you to figure out what that action may be.
Now, I think you're a mom. Is that correct?
Correct.
So how old are your children, if I may ask?
I have a daughter, and she's 14.
Okay, so I have 4 kids. We live in the suburbs. We don't come across homeless people, although we do have people. It's interesting. This suburban version of this and this has happened over the last 5 years. There's people who stand on street corners now at intersections with cardboard signs in the suburbs asking for money. They look fairly healthy. They look very different from the people that I see on the streets in the more urban environments. But beyond that, it was rare that I'd have to encounter a homeless person with one of my children. And as I mentioned in the recent episode with Robert Waples, I often give money to homeless people, not a lot, but if they're asking, I often give, and I view that as the right thing to do. A lot of people don't agree with that, but that was something I wanted to model for my children. But of course, I don't see them every day, and if I were walking by homeless folks every day, I think I would probably become something closer. I worry I'd become something closer to anesthetized, as you mentioned, and certainly with my kids. Having to learn about that. I think that would be an interesting part of their childhood, but you have to decide how to talk about it and how to deal with that, right?
You got it. And I made this commitment when my husband and I, we decided to stay here in San Francisco, knowing what's going on, seeing it every day, to approach it in a very specific way. I want to be part of something that is going to make an improvement, a long-term improvement. And when you, Russ, when I heard you say, "Oh, I'll give him some money," I just hung my head and I said, "No, everybody's got a personal choice. If you want
a short-term improvement."
That's right. And a lot of it is you feel like you're doing the right thing. It helps you. And this is what I threw this out to Facebook today, actually. I said, do you give to people on the street or do you not? And if so, why? What's going on? And almost everybody replied, yeah, I do. I give some. And because why? It makes me feel good. I'm doing the right thing. So I think not that there's anything wrong with personal gratification. You feel good doing something, but is it really doing anything for the person?
Well,
no.
I think I feel good about it because not because I think I'm doing the right thing. I feel good about it because I think I'm helping them. Now, I could be wrong. I might not actually be helping them. I might be making their situation worse. I might be discouraging them from choosing some other option, right? I might be discouraging them from going to a more formal system of help. But my view is that the people I'm giving money to, the ones I'm talking about, the more tragic-looking ones, they either seem uneasy about having an interaction with, say, a nonprofit or a government agency, and their lives are miserable. I feel bad for them, and I'm trying to do a very small amount to make their lives a little more pleasant. You think that's wrong?
I think that's a decent argument, but I'm sorry to say I don't think that actually stands the test of whether or not it's really going to do any good, because and I know, we have to be so observant here, is what is going to be done with that money. It kills me to see it go to waste, and I'm going to make a judgment. It goes to waste if it's going to go to alcohol, drugs, something harmful in the long run, and again, and I'll go even deeper than that. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong that when it does go to drugs, it's perpetuating the drug cycle in the United States and globally. I don't want this perpetuated. And so I guess I'll just kind of take that stance, which is, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I understand that. Let me go to the other extreme. Mm-hmm. I don't think I have a drinking problem. Okay, I could be wrong, of course. Some people think one of the ways is you find out someone has a drinking problem is they don't think they do. But I have might have 2 or 3 scotches a week, shots of scotch. It might be 2. Some weeks it's 1. There are probably some weeks when it's 4. But it's an occasional, once in a while, I have a scotch. And it gives me a lot of pleasure. I like the taste of it. It makes me feel good. And that's really the limit of my recreational drug habit, other than NyQuil, which I took last night because I've got a cold. So I'm kind of not a very interesting case. But I feel a little bit awkward telling a person on the street that those pleasures, even when they are destructive, are not for you. I'll give you a hamburger or a sprout of a broccoli tree, but you can't drink on my nickel and you can't use drugs on my nickel. Now, I understand the reality is that some people's lives are ruined by drugs. Some people's lives are ruined by alcohol. And it could be these are the people that I'm giving $1 to. Or sometimes it's a quarter. I understand that a quarter or $1 is not a life-changing event. It's never going to be part of a long-term solution. We're going to get some of those in a little bit, which I think is really wonderful, the longer-term ones. But for when I'm just walking by, to me, and I understand there's a little bit of illusion here, but to me, I'm treating this person before me with the utmost dignity, which is something they've mainly lost. They're sleeping on the street, and I'm saying to them when I give them my cash, which I give them freely to spend as they see fit, I recognize your dignity as a fellow human being. I am not going to let you I'm not going to treat you as a child. I'm going to give you the freedom to spend this gift as you see fit, even if it's not as how I would want that person to spend it. So that's my position. You can push back against it.
Okay, well, I think it's definitely the kind position, and it's the empathetic position as well. And it's.
I know you heard the Paul Bloom episode. So.
I do. I loved it, and it was very impactful. And I have to say, I am not above or below giving money every once in a long while. And you asked about my daughter and about raising a child in this atmosphere, and I will do it so carefully. If somebody's playing an instrument or, telling a joke, I want to reward behavior, which sounds so pedantic, like, I'm the parent and I'm reward. It's not that. It's, hey, you're doing something. You're making an effort. I love effort.
Me too.
So in those circumstances, I'm much more motivated to give. But I'm always, and this is something that you can do without giving and maybe having a potential harm, which is like the downtown streets team. I know we're going to get to it, but just say hi. It's that acknowledgement that you're human, I'm human, I'm saying hi. Fabulous. I do it all the time, and it can create kind of a shock, but it's great. It's free. It's never bad. It's always good.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's a little bit scary. It's interesting. There are times I've probably given money and looked away. I try not to. I try to look the person in the eye and say, have a good day, and say it with as if that's a great human. It's some human contact. It's not very impressive, actually, right? But it's better than I can't look at you. Here's some money to assuage my conscience.
Definitely. I'm going to tell you a quick story here. In San Francisco, we've got some major tent cities. This is pervasive. You got Skid Row, Chicago, so many. And the news went down there just recently to one of them, and the guys were begging. They said, please don't drop off your food anymore. It's what it's doing is that it's wreaking havoc on these tent cities, on the resident, the people who live there. Rats have taken over. Bugs have come into the tent cities. And so, but people will come and they will drop off a case of mangoes or some sandwiches, and they'll sit in the sun, and people they're too scared to get out of the car, so they'll just kind of drop them off and run away.
Yeah.
And this is it's a do-gooder gone bad. It doesn't make any sense. It's not helping, but it helps that person who thinks, I'm just going to give the food. But it is that sort of give and run away or smile and run away kind of approach, which it really doesn't help.
Just want to finish up, though, on this article you wrote. What are some of the issues you're trying to literally just give people, government officials they could or offices they could call under certain types of situations that occur on the street? And I should just say in passing, some of this problem, to the extent it is a problem, but some of this problem is that it's the fact that the city streets are public in the literal sense of the word. They're not owned. They're not. If I have an office building and you set up a folding chair in my lobby and decide to use it as your office, I can ask you to leave. And if you refuse, I can call the police and say you're trespassing and have you removed. On the street, it's kind of our street. It's no one's street. And at the same time, there are certain behaviors that are not allowed. And yet there are people doing them, and we often just turn an eye to them and don't look. We try not to look, or we ignore it. So what kind of things were you worrying about or helping people with in that article?
Okay, yeah, definitely. The list of behaviors that I described in the piece was unconscious people. You see somebody who's passed out, seemingly asleep. You don't know what's going on. Make an effort. Definitely, we have a 311 app here. And you can also call, report it. They'll get somebody down there. They'll check on them. It's really important. If you see drug dealing or intoxication, guess what? It's illegal. You can call the police and get somebody out there. Do something. Same goes with the erratic or threatening activity that you see. This is something that's terrifying to kids as a family or visitors to the city. They'll see people bashing into buildings or screaming at the top of their lungs, cursing, sometimes saying extremely racist or just
creepy,
frightening. Exactly. And you don't know what to do. Well, that's a threatening behavior. That's also a police activity action that you need to take. Aggressive panhandling. You're allowed to ask for money. Nothing wrong with that. You can do it. But when it comes to being followed or being harangued, or a lot of times they'll kind of block. They'll block oftentimes tourists and won't let them go before they get something, or they'll push a street sheet in their hand or some other product. Again, nudity. For some reason, we have a big problem with nudity here. People just take off their clothes, and that is a drug issue very often. And bathrooming. Yeah. People just relieving themselves on the sidewalk or in the street right in front of you happens all the time. It happens all the time.
Yeah. So I have to say, it's a weird thing. It's just kind of my my libertarian streak, which can be quite strong, especially my idea of minding my own business. There's something heroic and courageous about the fact, and also tragic and also crazy, about just ignoring that stuff. I understand it's illegal. A lot of those things are literally illegal or borderline illegal. And part of me just says this person has a horrible life. They're cursing or they're relieving themselves in public, which is tragic and unpleasant. And I just sort of think it's not my business, in the sense that I don't want them to fall in the hands of someone. If they want help, I'd like them to get it. But I often feel that we don't help them very well. Now, that may be a bit naive, or I don't know. Maybe that's just making me feel comfortable by ignoring the behavior. But it's not obvious to me that I'll say it a different way. Let me try to say it a more dramatic way. Until about 1980, we locked all these people up. We said, you're not normal, and a lot of them aren't. And we said, you're mentally ill, which is a phrase that has some clinical meaning, but not always. You make people uncomfortable is what it often meant. You're not normal. And we're going to put you in an institution, and we're often going to do stuff to you, like shock treatments and drugs and other things that you don't want, because we recognize that you're not normal and we want to make you normal. And we're not very good at that, it turns out. We're not very good at making people normal. So a part of me says this is a human tragedy, but we're not very good at helping these folks. And in particular, the ways we try to help them now are not so attractive to them, which is why I think they're on the street. If you went up to these folks and said, some of the people we're talking about, and said, can I get you help? They would not want to talk to you. Now, that could be for a lot of reasons, obviously. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely correct, and I think that it would be horrible if we began to institutionalize people just because they're a little off. That's a travesty. We don't want to head in that direction. But it's so interesting because I keep hearing the word help, 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 help. We want to help, and I want kind of almost the opposite, which is I want them to help us. The more you give to somebody, the more, I know we're going to go into this a little bit, the more you are, if you're constantly in the position where somebody's giving to you and trying to help you, you feel, I firmly believe this, you feel weak. You feel less than human. You feel unnecessary, unneeded, in the way, like a burden, and somebody's taking pity on you. What does that do to you? And you could be as sane can be, or completely out of it. It's going to have the same effect, which is you're not worth anything. What your worth is, you're worth somebody kind of throwing a pittance at you, or that you just desperately need help. I want the opposite. How can you help the world? What can you do? What skills do you have? What passions do you have? Even somebody who's been curled up in a corner of an alleyway, they've got something. They do. They had to. At some stage in their life, they had something. And I think that's really that's where the answer to me lies. Drawing that out.
Okay, we'll
turn. Which sounds really. Yeah, I was going to say that sounds good. Okay.
Yeah, we'll turn to that. I just want to agree with you, which I know it's actually quite interesting. It's interesting to me how unpopular your view is these days. That dignity it's difficult to have dignity if you're only taking and not giving. And I think there's a lot of, for a variety of reasons, I think people don't like that argument anymore. It was the common argument for about 3,000 years or so, maybe 2,500, that if you are merely taking, then it's hard to be dignified, and that's not much of a solution. So I'm going to half agree with you. I certainly agree that it's the first half, the out-of-date ancient part. I agree with you that even though it's out of fashion, I do think people who don't produce or give and who only take have trouble maintaining their dignity. I think that's true, but it's not popular, that view. But the part I disagree with a little bit maybe is I think in that state I'd rather help them a little bit and assuage some of that pain if I could with money. But I certainly accept the fact that it's not a long-run solution. So let's talk about what is possible that's actually truly helpful, which is this organization you've gotten involved with called the Downtown Streets team. What do they do? What's their approach?
Yeah, the approach is, the mission is dignity through work. And it's sort of this revolutionary, non-revolutionary program. In fact, there are a few programs throughout the United States that have the same model, which is offer work. Just offer. And so this particular organization, what they do is they have these Tuesday meetings. Any homeless person can come. You could be in the worst state imaginable. But just come, just sit in the meeting and enroll. All you have to do is put your name down, and you will be given very quickly a broom, a brush, some mops, whatever, something to work on city beautification programs. And in exchange, you get a gift card that you can buy essentials with, food and toothpaste and that type of thing. So it cuts through this bureaucratic junk that you have to go through in order to get a shelter bed or financial assistance or whatever. All you do is you work, and you work on these programs, and you go out to the Civic Center or to Union Square area, and it's a symbiotic relationship. The city gains because the streets are nicer. The people gain because they're actually working and earning something, and the response is overwhelming, and the members become almost evangelical in bringing other homeless people to these meetings. And it's remarkable. It's very similar. I feel like I'm in this kind of a religious revival meeting with people who are involved, homeless people who are saying, you've got to come, you've got to start, this is what I'm doing. And the pride, it'll bring tears to your eyes. And that is to me where the magic happens. And so why this is in any way a bad thing that people can criticize, I don't get it. And by the way, that article that I wrote, the hate mail, oh my gosh, it was off the charts. So even an alternative program like this can kind of result in eyes. Are you serious? Really? We're going to ask them to work? And, hey, it's not me, it's them. They want to.
Well, it's a voluntary
and it's really
program,
effective.
Right? It's a voluntary program.
Absolutely. So nobody's shoving it in their hands. They're doing it. And they bring other people involved and so to the team. So it's really I'm such a huge advocate for it. But there's others throughout the country that do very similar programs, and it really is. It's quite remarkable. It's beautiful.
So give us some idea of what the magnitudes are here. There's a couple of different dimensions to talk about. So on a particular Tuesday, how many people might show up? What's an average or rough idea of, is it 4 people? Is it 40?
Oh, it's about, I'd say anywhere between 50 and 100.
And there's different ones all around the Bay Area. There's one, right? They're not just in San Francisco, but you're talking about the San Francisco one.
I am. And this started in the South Bay. But, it's a model that could be recreated anywhere. It's so simple. Do you want your streets cleaned? Great. Where are we going to get the funding? Very often it's like a business district that'll provide the funding. And then offer it up. You want to do it? Great. You can start. And And the people who do get involved, the members, they get a caseworker, so they get started. And then I jump in and I help with their credit problems and their money problems, because guess what? They had a life before this. Almost all of them had something that happened. And so they do actually have maybe sometimes some credit issues or some money questions that they need answering. So it just becomes a step-up program. Very exciting. And whether it's this program or some other program that's doing the same thing, it's not let's help the homeless and kind of pat them on the head and shove them along. This is real.
Let's talk about that. So how does the organization, there's two issues I want to get a better feel for. One is, if I hand you a broom and say, go sweep somewhere, is there any supervision? Is there any follow-up to say the person did a good job or not? And then the other question I had is, how much money is on the gift card? Is it one day at work? Is it that Tuesday? Do they work all week? Do they show up multiple days? Can you give us a feel for that?
Sure. No, they work in teams. That there is a supervisor, and the supervisor is usually somebody who's been through the program before, and who's just making sure you're there on time. Are you just going to chit chat, or are you actually sweeping or removing graffiti? And almost everybody follows through. In fact, there's even a blind guy. He's been blind from day one, and he's sweeping. He's working with somebody who's telling him where to sweep, because it's very, very often the idea is it's not the what they're actually doing, but they're doing it. So they go through that, and then after a few weeks of being on time, being committed to the program, then they start to build a resume, and the caseworkers can help them get real jobs and real housing.
Let's go back to how much money do they get, and
sure.
How frequently, my view, this classic story, which it's easy to make fun of, but I actually like it a lot, and I may have told it on the air before. I apologize, but the story is the little girl who's tossing the beached starfish back into the water, and there's a person comes along and says, "What are you doing?" So I'm helping the starfish, and the person says, "Well, there's hundreds of thousands of them," and the person says, "Well, you're never gonna make a difference. Look how many there are." And the little girl picks up the starfish, puts it back in the water, and says, "Made a difference to that one." So I don't want to undersell anything that makes one person's life better. That would be great. But do you have any feel for whether there's once someone actually moved from this program to normal work, or is it a few dozen, or do we have, what kind of follow-up is happening? So tell us about the amounts of money on the gift card, if you know,
Sure.
And then sort of the kind of success rate this has. And again, I want to emphasize, someone working and feeling good about themselves, if that's actually what it does, is great. So to me, success has a lot of different dimensions.
Yeah. Well, it's only a couple $100s on the gift card, and they get paid out once. They get the gift card once a week. So but it's money they've earned, so it feels different. And the success rate, well, people do tend to stay with it. It's a relatively new program. And but I've seen with my own eyes. I was walking down the street the other day, and I saw this guy. His name was Moses, young guy. Something was off about him. I can't really tell what his situation was, but he's now working as a city worker. So he's got a city job, which, by the way, pays quite well and has very good benefits. And so I said, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I've got a full-time job now." I had just seen him about a month previous to that, where he was doing what he was doing. He was sweeping up the streets with Downtown Streets team.
Do they recruit folks actively, or do they only rely on word of mouth? I mean, in other words, it would be an interesting model to think about putting, besides giving somebody $1, giving them a card that has the contact information or the location for the Tuesday morning meeting. How do they reach out to the homeless, or do they just use word of mouth?
At this stage, it's just word of mouth, and we've just recently started this idea of where we would have postcards where we could give to people and say, you may want to check this out. It's not too far. It's right in the heart of the bad area of town anyway. You're going to be there. So head on over. There's donuts, there's coffee. You can go do it. And again, gosh, it really does have this almost, as they say, almost like a religious overtone, just show up at the meeting.
Well, historically, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, it has that tone almost, but without there's zero religious involvement.
I was going to say, historically, religious organizations often did a quid pro quo. You come to our meeting and get a dose of our religion, and then we'll either feed you or give you some work or whatever it is. But this is a purely secular organization, correct?
Totally secular. Yeah, and it's run by these young, enthusiastic people who just leave me breathless, and they do good work. But again, Russ, I mean, this is just one program. There's others. There's one in Chicago where they'll pull up and they'll offer people work. In fact, a journalist who I just recently communicated with out of Chicago from the Sun, he wrote about Safe Haven Foundation, where they drive around and they offer panhandlers a chance to work. Here you go, do it. If you want to do it, we'll have it for you. And that's the kind of thing that's so exciting.
How do they interact with city government, so the organization? So there's two issues that come to mind. One is the city has people who sweep the streets, obviously, and pick up litter and clean graffiti up. They may not do the best job, or they may do a great job, but there's a question of how. Obviously, to me, I don't know if everybody would agree with me, but to me, the more real work you can offer a person that's actually changing something, the more dignity you give them in return, as opposed to just pretending that they're doing something and giving them money in return. So do you know how that works, how they interact with tasks that are somewhat already covered? Yeah,
it's here, it's side by side. So one doesn't interact with the other. They just sort of do their thing. We have, obviously, city workers who are supposed to come and remove graffiti, but you could wait several weeks before that actually happens. Downtown Streets team, they will be on it. It's right there. So it's really kind of exciting. Now, is it going to displace city workers? I don't know, nor do I care.
So there's a case in the article that we were talking about where there was a flower stand that was abandoned, was being used as a place for people to take drugs, hang out and sleep or whatever, and the city can't do anything about it for reasons that I can't fully understand, but because it's abandoned, but for some reason it's got some protected status now, like I don't know. But I'm curious if there are things that I would think that the Downtown Streets team folks are kind of operating in a little bit of a gray area maybe, and do things that maybe a city worker wouldn't do, or I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. And it's funny you brought up that the flower stand issue is something that I took on as a personal challenge. I saw this stand that was this piece of blight. It was a flower stand at some stage of its life, and then it had turned into a public toilet, a place to deal drugs. It was right on our historic cable car line. I mean, it was like, why is this here?
Tourists.
Oh, it's so lovely. I know. And so I fought with the city for going on 2 years where I harangued them. I think every time they went to work and they opened up their email, they'd be like, God, no, not Eric again. And eventually they did tear it up, and I had glory, and it was wonderful. But yeah, it takes that sometimes. It really takes people jumping up and down, screaming, and willing to make a fool of themselves to get some action. And when you have a better organization that's extremely responsive and doesn't just kind of like push you off and say, we'll get to it when we get to it, or even worse, in a situation where like we've got a board of supervisors. But this is always brought up in community police meetings, of which I'm always a big part of. And, our supervisor said, well, we can't do anything. It's an income inequality problem. And I'm looking at him like he's just grown a second head. I want to scream. It's just so annoying.
But going back to the team, so you said a couple $100, not much money. Well, that's a huge amount of money, obviously, probably, I assume, compared to the average quarters and dollars that they collect from panhandling. At the same time, it's less than the minimum wage if they're working 40 hours. And I also wonder why it's a gift card, why it's not cash. So do you have thoughts on that?
I do. It's because it falls under the kind of the radar of taxes. This is a gift. It is a gray area. They're not officially working. It's a volunteer program. In exchange, they get a gift card. Yeah, and now it is, and the end result, the end goal is always that, hey, you worked hard doing this. You worked hard volunteering at this program, and now we're going to vouch for you so that you can get a real job. It's a kind of I would imagine it as a sort of jumping up to the next level, and you're jumping up and you're continuing to do it, and all behind during this process, you got the cheerleaders going, you can do it, you're doing great. And it's not just the program people, it's the members, it's the people who are behind them, holding their hands sometimes and saying, I saw you pick up that trash. I saw how many cigarette butts you collected, and that was amazing. And I got to say, Russ, can you imagine somebody who's been sleeping in a corner alone? Very often they've got no interaction with anybody, right? And now they've got somebody saying, wow, thank you so much. That was incredible. It's such a difference. It leaves me speechless, and I'm not often speechless.
No, I think it's an incredible thing. I just I'm wondering how the scope for scale is in an organization like that. Obviously, it's hard to make it, say, twice as big, but it can be done. There's no economies of scale. That's a better way to say it. It's not like, well, we have a pilot with 100 people. If we could do 1,000, well, 1,000's about 10 times harder than 100. You need that many more opportunities. You need that many more caseworkers, that many more people to help follow up. So it's a challenge, but it seems like it could have a big impact on people's lives. And it'd be interesting to hear in more detail. Obviously, you're not with the organization, but it'd be interesting to see if they have any measures of just how successful. It's amazing. 1, as I said, it's not a bad number. 1 is great. 100's better. 1,000's better than that. But you've been involved with some financial advice for folks. Tell us what that's like and what kind of interaction you've had with the folks in the program.
Well, I started out with a long time ago. I first got into financial assistance at Consumer Credit Counseling Service, where I was helping people in debt. And how are you going to get out of it, and kind of developing a plan. And that actually just came from because I'm really good with budgeting. You know, I could make a penny, go very far, and still have a good time. So I like to think that I bring this to the organization, which is if you do receive money, in whatever form, here's how to make it last. Here's how to make it work for you. Here's what you can do. If you've got something on your credit report, I can help you get it off. I can, in a legal way. It's just it's guidance, it's assistance. And this is so important to me because you think about it, is when you feel stuck, sometimes you don't see the door that's opening. I want to open up that door. That's all I want to do is here's an option. Here's what you can do. Here's how I can help with that. And so that's what I do.
So how much cash do these folks have? And how many, I'm just thinking about the practical side of this. You can be homeless and have a Social Security number, but it's hard to be homeless without you don't have an address usually, almost by definition. You could have a post office box, but I'm just thinking, first, if I'm getting gift cards, I don't have any cash unless I sell the gift card, which I could. Might be hard to do, though. And then my second question then would be, if I have some cash, to turn that into some kind of credit situation where it really requires an address where I can get a credit card bill and apply for things. Are these folks that you're helping, people who've made it past the sleeping on the street stage, or are they still in pretty severe situation? They're
in various stages. Some are starting to work, and because of that, they want to get their credit report in a good working order, because very often employers will look at a credit report just to see what's been going on. They don't look at scores, that's a myth, but definitely the credit report for that. And the same thing with tenancy. So certainly a landlord is going to take a look at a credit report and is going to see, has this person paid their bills or not? So it's really important to get that in as best shape as possible. And the good news, and this is probably why I started this business in the first place, is these are doable situations. I love money because there's always something positive you can do. I can't help with your health, but I can help with this. So there's always something that you can do when it comes to cleaning up your credit history or making a little bit more money and applying it to some debt.
But how's that address this issue work? So let's say, obviously it's useful to someone if they can use it responsibly to have a credit card. For all kinds of reasons, it's pleasant, obviously, to not have to worry about the timing of your income and your purchases. But it's also a door opener. It lets you, as you say, you can accumulate a report which can help you open doors elsewhere. How do you get started if you don't have an address or you don't have any cash?
Yeah, the good folks over at this program at Downtown Streets team, they will help with an address. So there's a mailing address that people can get their mail, or do a post office box, or they'll help you with that. They'll help the members with that. And
so let's raise this another question. So I've got either no credit history or the credit history I have is bad. How can people get access to a credit card? Do they get them?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So once you get a job and you have some income coming in, it's just as long as it's steady, banks are typically okay with that. And you could start with a secured credit card, couple $100s, which sounds really crazy. Like this homeless person has enough for a down payment on a credit card, because that's kind of what it is. Although it's you can get it back at the end. But it's a start, and that's how anybody can start with credit, whether you're homeless or not. So it's, to me, the best option. Plus, on top of that, you get this great benefit of having money in savings, because that's what it is. So it really is a win-win.
What do you mean money in savings? Because you've put it on the card?
If it's a secured card, this money goes into a supplementary savings account. It just sits there. So you've got a cash, lump sum of cash right there that you could use at any time. If you want to close the card, get your money back. So to me, it's always this. It definitely gives the bank assurance that if something happens, they can get cash out, so it reduces their risk, but it reduces the risk for the consumer, I hate the word consumer, for the person, where they know that if they really, really need that money, it's there.
Do you do any so some of the counseling you're doing is very basic, like pay your bills on time, and do you find yourself giving other types of advice to folks, and what kind of scope is there for that kind of advice? What kind of issues come up that you've been able to help people with?
I guess the only type of advice that I give that's different than just straight credit and money management is it's not so much advice as it is encouragement, and everybody needs that. Where you're doing great. Hey, you saved this money, or I helped you get rid of this thing on your credit report that looks terrible. You did wonderful. So it's just a interaction, being present.
I think you're probably pretty good at the inspiration thing, Erica.
Thank you very much.
You seem like a pretty upbeat person.
Well, I am, and I have been through it, and you and I talked a little bit about it. So it's not like I don't have a background personally in homelessness.
What issue are you referring to?
When I was a kid, my parents went through a long, brutal divorce, and we were doing fine financially, and then we weren't doing fine financially, and it was a descent from upper middle class lifestyle to pretty much the bottom. Thankfully I was immune to some of it because I was out of the country. I was going to college in London. But my little sisters and my brother, they witnessed and experienced my mother living in her car with them. So I know how fast it can happen. I know what it can do to a person. I know the devastating effects it has. And so I definitely have a soft spot for it.
Yeah, it's in our modern world, we've changed so radically from the past. There were so many things in the past that were not so attractive in how we deal with these things. And we always, in the past, I think we're eager to blame the person rather than their circumstances. And today we've gone in the other direction. We tend to never blame the person. We blame the circumstances. And of course, reality is a complicated mix of all of that. And it's hard to design public policy and personal policy for how you cope with that, right? It's not an easy. There's no perfect answer to how we can help people who've had bad luck or who've made bad decisions, which are the two extremes, right?
Absolutely. And I think most people do bounce back and they've got this ability to kind of climb on out of it, but not everybody does. And you talked a little bit about mental health issues. We don't have a lot of psychiatric beds. They don't seem to exist. So, and of course, helping somebody get off a substance is just kind of nightmarish. So people do need a lot more help than we're giving them in those areas.
Going back to the counseling, are you doing this one-on-one? Are you giving? I think you earlier said you're giving sometimes it's a seminar, or is it a mix of both?
We just switched over so that I'm the on-call credit and money management person who they will connect me with a person who needs assistance or guidance, and I volunteer my time doing that.
And how much interaction do you have in a given week? Is it you get one phone call or do you get 10? What kind of level of?
This just started and we're constantly changing it. So before I was giving workshops, but it was hard to get everybody there at the same time. So, and we kept struggling with like scheduling this, like how are we going to get everybody when they're off working or when they're doing other needy, things that are going to fulfill their needs. So then I just recently, week, and I said, why don't you just have me as the on-call person? She said, fabulous. That's what we want. So I love the pivot. This is why I love non-government assistance because they're already like,
flexible.
Okay, that didn't work.
Let's try this. Yeah.
That didn't work. We're going to try this.
No, I love that.
Isn't that brilliant? It's instead of this cruise ship, which takes forever to turn around, it's like, we're going to be a race car.
But there is still a puzzle which you can help me with, which is I assume most folks who need the help don't have cell phones. How do they, or do they? How do you help them? How will you help them in this new model? When you're on call, what's it going to mean to be on call?
So first of all, yes, if you come on, in fact, I think you were just in San Francisco recently. Look around, a lot of them do have cell phones. They even have. I've seen people with iPads, and I don't know where they're getting them from. But yeah, a lot of them are connected. Maybe it's just because, boy, we're here in the world of tech, so you see it all the time with people with cell phones. And I believe there is a program where people can get cell phones for free. And I think that's sort of the root of that.
But is that when you're going to quote be on call? Are they going to call you? Or are they going to call an office that's going to collect their issues?
No, call me directly. So the people who manage the program. If the member has a question and or needs some assistance, they give them my number and they will call me.
That'll be interesting. Is there a long-term plan for the organization, for Downtown Streets team? Are they just going to do what they're doing and try to do it better? Do they have dreams or plans for doing something different down the road? Do they have a longer-term vision? Again, I think I salute what they're doing now. It's fantastic. Seems fantastic. I'd have to see more of it. But do they have different visions for down the road? Do you know?
I know that it's expanding. There are right now, I think there's 5 or 6 different areas that in the Bay Area that they concentrate on. But any person or government agency or maybe a retail merchant group can contact them and say, we want to start something like that here in our community. And they'll just follow that same model. So that is the idea. Come on over, get what you need. Now bring it over to the people who need it.
How bureaucratic is the process so let's say I'm on a sweeping team or graffiti removing team and for X weeks. What's the process by which I might get something more like a job? Is it up to the individuals, or does the organization try to look for people individually? Is there how is that organized?
When you start, as a homeless person and you're starting to participate, you become what's called a team member, and you're assigned a caseworker. And that caseworker you have communication with. They check in with you. You check in with them, and after a while of success, hopefully success, then they will take you on to the next stage where it's connecting with jobs, local jobs. They are keyed into what's available in the area, and then they can assist with that next step, the interview process, and matching jobs to the skill set. So it really is a very. You ask about bureaucracy, almost none, which makes me just beam beyond, because how can people even if it's hard enough to get up, brush your teeth, if you have access to a toothbrush and just going through these hoops that you have to in order to get a shelter bed or to do anything, it's daunting. It's forget about it. It doesn't have that at all. Are
there any particular? Are the caseworkers have a particular set of training, by the way? I didn't ask about that.
Yeah, they come from social work backgrounds and what their actual training process is.
But they're typically social workers, though.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I look forward to learning more about it. Maybe my next time in the city, maybe this summer, I could see some of what the program's doing firsthand. That would be really interesting to me.
Yes, it would. And I think everybody should experience it, because it really isn't we started off this conversation where it's like, should I give $1? What is this? And then after this rich conversation, you realize, wow, there's so much more that you can do. And, I've been to plenty of fundraisers now for the organization. I'm like, you want my money? You got it. You want my time? You got it. And I think it makes people kind of stand up and cheer. And I think that's, could be more exciting than that. And plus, there's nobody who, unfortunately, is speaking on behalf of residents and merchants and even tourists, where it's like, we don't want this either. We don't want people on the street. It's depressing. It's sad. It's scary. And so it helps. It's very symbiotic, as I said.
My guest today has been Erica Sandberg. Erica, thanks for being part of EconTalk.
Thank you so much.
This is EconTalk, part of the Library of Economics and Liberty. For more EconTalk, go to econtalk.org, where you can also comment on today's podcast and find links and readings related to today's conversation. The sound engineer for EconTalk is Rich Goyette. I'm your host, Russ Roberts. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on Monday.